big news. Fast Company has just named Husk Power one of the 50 most innovative companies in the world. Husk Power is redefining the energy landscape with an innovative business model focused on community solar mini-grids powered by artificial intelligence, AI. Their solutions are helping to lay the groundwork for prosperity in rural and peri-urban areas across sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. And now Husk's work, they caught the attention of experts worldwide, earning them charges for world's best challenger brand winner in 2023. Today, we're excited to have with us William Brent, the Chief Marketing Officer of Husk Power, who is not only leading the charge on their marketing strategy, but is also a passionate advocate for climate solutions, branding, and communications. Welcome, William. It's great to have you on the podcast today.
It's great to be here, Natalie. Thank you.
In today's conversation, we're discussing how to successfully ensure local communities, government, and investors understand and embrace the benefits of clean energy. But before we get into that, I'd love to hear more about your journey and your personal passion for climate tech.
My journey is unfortunately a little too longer than I'd like. I've aged a little bit, have a little gray in my beard, but I've been mostly involved in the world of branding, marketing, communications my whole career. That's the one thread that cuts throughout most of the work that I've done. I was originally a foreign correspondent and editor in China. I was involved in a number of startups when I lived in China, where I spent 15 years that were focused on digital marketing, film production. There was also a company I started that did performing arts promotion. So I've done a lot of work in the entertainment and media world. And then in the early 2000s, when I moved back to the United States from where I'm from my time in China, I decided at that point that I was going to make a pivot and move into the world of climate solution sustainability. And I often talk about my time in China as being one which I think of as being probably one of the most unique in human history. I witnessed, 15 years of China going from basically a command economy that was coming out of the Cultural Revolution to one that was essentially the manufacturing plant of the globe, and an economy that was booming. And it was very clear to me at that time that the growth path that China was on and that other countries in the developing world like India and elsewhere in Africa would follow would make the world that we're living even more unsustainable. So I was going to do what I could to try and avoid that potential future. So I decided to make that shift. And that's when I joined an international marketing services company, and I helped them start their climate solutions and clean tech practice. That was in 2005, 2006. I did that for 10 years, working with a lot of brands as a consultant, global brands, medium-sized growth companies, small startups, across the whole spectrum of climate solutions. And then I quit and I moved to Spain with my family for no good reason other than to do something different, and got involved as a co-founder of an NGO that started to focus on Africa and energy access. And that's been basically the last 10 years of my career. And I joined my company Husk Power about 3.5 years ago now as CMO, and absolutely loving the challenge of the work that I'm doing and the people that I get to work with. And so here I am.
That's quite a shift, and go from China to Spain, lots of cultures. Big markets for Husk Power in Nigeria and India. That also must be a cultural shift for you.
Yes. Asia, I spent 15 years, so I'm quite familiar with that region. I didn't spend that much time in India when I lived there, so it's been a real educational experience for me. Africa was relatively new for me before I started or co-founded that NGO. It's always been something that I wanted to get more involved in as a region. I always felt like Africa was going to be the next economic growth area worldwide, and the need for people to jump into that journey with countries in Africa was going to be very exciting and something that I wanted to be involved in. So yeah, it's been a real learning experience, and I've absolutely loved it. I mean, I've probably traveled now to about 10 different countries in Africa. I spend quite a bit of time in India, and I'm starting to feel like I know what I'm actually talking about.
What challenges have you come across that has meant that you know what you're talking about, that has put you in the deep end, as it were, has exposed you, and what have you gained from that?
Right, so maybe this is a chance for me to talk a little bit about what Husk Power does, right? You mentioned mini grids, and so we started as a mini grid company 16 years ago in India. Our co-founder and CEO is from India, so he's from the global south, and he always felt strongly when he started the company that he wanted to create a business model that would be able to help bring electricity to, at that time, more than 1 billion people who didn't have electricity. Now it's down to about 700 million. And that was always his vision. And that was also something through the NGO that I mentioned that I was also spending a lot of my time on and focus trying to help bring solutions, mostly private sector solutions, to those communities. As you mentioned, they're very climate vulnerable. They're mostly in rural communities. There's high unemployment, and it's a really tough environment for people to be living in. I think that when I look back at the last 3.5 years at Husk and the last 16 years as a company, I think we faced two main challenges as a company. Number one is that we are a category creator. We basically pioneered this industry, and it wasn't a asset class from an investor, to use an investment terminology. It wasn't an asset class that people understood. How do we invest in this? What's the risk profile? What's the impact that we're going to be making? What's the return on investment? All of those things were unknown at the time that we started. So, creating a category means that you have to do a lot of education and advocacy work with government, with investors, with the communities that you're serving to help them understand what is this category? What is this asset class that we're talking about, and why is it important? So that was one challenge. I think the other challenge, which is no less insignificant, is that we also had to be market builders, because we go into communities that are, as you said, either unserved completely without electricity or underserved, where they have unreliable and poor quality electricity. So the consumers that we're serving, in many cases, have never used electricity before. And so, there's also a lot of work that needs to be done to educate those markets and help them understand what is electricity, how do I use it, how much money should I be spending on electricity every month, can I afford an appliance? All of these things are very time-consuming and resource-heavy endeavors. That all of those so those are I see this as the two main challenges that we're trying to overcome and still are working on. You add into that another layer, which is that since we have been around for 16 years, we about halfway through that journey, we came to a point where we were close to failure as a company, and we had to make a pivot in our business model to make sure that we would be sustainable as a business. What that meant was not only providing electricity to these communities, but also thinking about what do they need on top of that electricity. Electricity is just an entry point. You need electricity for certain things, for lighting schools or homes for students, or powering healthcare centers, or powering a household appliance, a fan, a refrigerator, or even machines used by small businesses like rice milling, or cold storage, or even introducing electric mobility to these communities. I mean, we're talking about communities that are completely unserved, not just for energy, but of everything, right? And so we came to understand that aside from just being a more traditional utility and selling electricity, we also had to work very hard on the demand side, not only to better serve our customers, but also to make our business sustainable. So you add all of those things in, plus working across different cultures. You've got India, and the culture there is very different from Nigeria and the culture there. And plus we're expanding into multiple other countries. That level of complexity uh, creates a lot of different needs from a branding, marketing, and communication perspective. And so that, that's my job, trying to sort of sort through that and figure out how to approach each stakeholder group in a different way, by region, by stakeholder type, et cetera.
So if we take the first one of the first categories, a community, and building a market for electricity, which I know some people coin productive use of power, and looking at your background in marketing, communications, and brand, how were you able to apply that to solve for it? Do you have any top strategies or campaigns that really worked in the community for solving for productive use of power?
Well, again, it sort of depends, right? By country, by region, by even community. It also depends on which part of our business you're talking about, right? Because we sell electricity, we also sell appliances, plus provide consumer finance for those appliances. We're introducing value-added services like electric motorcycles, leasing and battery swapping, plus setting up rice milling hubs, cold storage hubs, those things, and it varies by community. The needs of each community can be different. So sort of parsing through all of that, it really depends. So for the electricity side of our business, in Nigeria, I'll use as the example, because it's as I said, the largest unelectrified population in the world. And I think it's, fascinating what's happening there, and the partnership that's happening between private sector companies like mine and the government. You don't have any digital infrastructure in the communities that you're trying to serve, or very little. The penetration of smartphones is very low. So you really have to look at more traditional branding and marketing activities to reach those people. And that means holding regular town halls, in the communities that you're serving, bringing together all of the stakeholders to help them understand what it is that we're doing and how they can benefit. What are the dangers of accessing electricity? What are the various tariffs packages that we offer that are best suited for them? And we have town criers that we employ to go from community to community to help spread the word. We've set up village power committees in each community that we serve. That's a mix of different stakeholders from those communities, including the local chieftains, women's groups, youth groups, entrepreneurs. So I'd say that the lion's share of activity that we're doing there would be what people refer to as below the line. We do some street branding, site branding, and things like that. So you'll see Husk, the brand, in any community that you go to. But it's really a very hands-on, engagement-focused strategy in terms of all of the branding, the marketing, and the communications. And trying to sort through what's the communications that most resonates with them, that's most meaningful to them. These are people who don't have a lot of disposable income. Many of them, as I said, are unemployed. So you really have to make a strong case from a communications perspective and build a brand that has trust based on that communications that is going to last for the 20 to 25 years that our mini grids are in operation. So it's I'd say, it's definitely not extremely sophisticated in the sense of all of the different marketing tools that might be used elsewhere in more mature markets, but it's also really interesting, challenging, and it's also very rewarding because you're face to face with your customer on a daily basis, where in other businesses that I've been involved in, they're quite removed from the brand.
I remember a story from Kano State Distribution Company, the disco there. I know that they actually took the women of the communities, they taught them basic numeracy, in the community halls in colleges and classrooms, and then they were empowered to do their collections,
Yeah,
so
I
that
mean, so on that,
they follow the
yeah,
line and yeah.
yeah, yeah. So the gender piece is really interesting, right? I mean, everybody I think in the world who deals in development knows that serving women is really good business, right? Women are the best customers, hands down, right? Everybody, I think, is very clear about that. But unfortunately, in many of these communities, women often don't have decision-making power or purchase power. So you have to also figure out how to work around those cultural barriers to try and reach them, which is a key focus for us as a company. We're starting to disaggregate our data on customers by gender. We're starting to do a much more in-depth segmentation of women entrepreneurs in the communities that we serve so we can figure out how to best serve them. We've already launched marketing campaigns in India directly focused at village level women entrepreneurs to help them do exactly what you mentioned, right? Giving them very basic training on financial literacy, on customer retention, but also providing them incentives to use solar electricity in their business and then trying to push people in those communities through various campaigns to purchase at their stores. So, I think the gender piece of this definitely should never be underestimated in terms of its importance. And it's something that we're starting, have been spending quite more effort on in the past couple of years.
And I know that your stakeholders go beyond the community, government and investors. How does your style of communication differ talking to your other stakeholders?
Yeah, so I mean, governments and investors, as I mentioned, this is a new asset class to them. Governments, I think, well, it's not. I think it's true for both of those groups, right? They're used to legacy energy solutions, the grid and extending that grid. That doesn't work, or at least based on historical performance. Grid extension has failed to reach these people. There's 700 million people worldwide. There's about 500 million or more in sub-Saharan Africa alone. These are generations of people who these communities have been living without energy. And they've been promised energy for generations as well. It's never arrived. And so despite that, most of the governments that we've dealt with, and it's starting to change for sure, and many of the investors that we deal with, they don't really know how to get their head around, sort of what it is that mini grids do and why they're beneficial in terms of speed of deployment, cost effectiveness, in terms of use of capital. We're mobilizing hundreds of millions of dollars that the government doesn't have to mobilize, right, to come in and electrify these communities, and not only electrify them, provide them with all these other services that we provide. We electrify health clinics, we electrify schools, et cetera. So I think, it's been a lot of very high-touch engagement with governments. I also do a lot of our government engagement work. And that's the only way that you're going to get a government to buy into these types of solutions and see them as more than just sort of a stopgap interim solution, but one that's actually long-term, sustainable, climate resilient, financially efficient for them. That requires a lot of hand-holding and one-on-one engagement. So, and I'd say similarly that's the case for investors as well, but more from a de-risking profile. So helping them understand the risk profile of what it is we do, why it is a bankable asset class, and being in the venues, at the fora where they're present, engaging with them one-on-one as well, winning, and raising the brand globally is really important to doing that. We've won multiple awards. You mentioned the Best Challenger Brand from Charge and the Fast Company Award, but we've also been awarded for our work in artificial intelligence, sustainability, and that helps get the word out to government leaders, to financial leaders who make decisions. And I think it started to pay off. I mean, the work I did at my NGO, but also the work I'm doing at Husk. The World Bank is a good example. They have this program now that's trying to electrify 300 million people by the end of the decade. When I first started engaging the bank on these issues, just to give you a sense of what success looks like, 10 years ago, it was an afterthought, if that, for the World Bank or the African Development Bank. Today, it's the number one priority for them, right? So there's been a real shift in perception of the industry's brand. Husk has been part of that, but the industry's brand and the work that we've done to support that has been instrumental in hopefully changing the trajectory of where we're headed.
You just talked about how important the industry's brand is. Looking at Africa's um, energy sector and a reputation of energy within Africa, has there been any crucial moments or again campaigns that you think that have really transformed the reputation, or do you think it's incremental?
So, I think my view is that we have a great story to tell. It's not as well known as it needs to be. And why do I say that? Because the legacy solution, which is the grid and the extension of that grid, has failed. It's failed these communities for generations. So there's a pent-up desire for something different, a change, something new. The brand reputation of the utilities in these markets is also, I'd say, less than optimal, if to put it politely. But we're not your mother's utility, and we're not your grandmother's utility. We're a brand new type of utility. In fact, we're not a utility. We're a rural energy services company that just happens to provide electricity, but then adds all of these other value adds on top of it. So I think what we face with that is number one, as I said, we're a new category, so people still have to get their head around what it is that we do. But on the positive side, we also, in some ways, because people see us as a utility, we have to bear that burden of the legacy solutions because people don't believe that utilities are going to actually deliver what they promise, right? And so, it's extremely important, maybe more important than anything else, for us to build brand trust. And, that's where very a high degree of engagement, one-on-one, with those communities becomes really critical. And you're seeing the results, in terms of our communities. I think we're really transforming these communities. So, I think we have some challenges that aren't of our making that we have to overcome. But, bit by bit, we're, building, we've got a staff of over 1,000 now. We're hiring 90% of those people from the local communities that we serve, which is also really good for branding and community engagement and trust. And we're doing a lot of recruiting of youth across the company as well. The other thing I would just say is one other thing in our favor is that, in many of the communities that we serve, the main competitor, because the grid's not present, is diesel generation. And it's polluting. It's not it's carbon intensive. It's expensive, right? And so that's another benefit in our favor, working in our favor, is that we can come up against diesel generation and provide 30 to 50% savings for customers overnight by switching to solar electricity. So you've got to sort of mix the product benefits. As well as we are in this for the long haul, 20 to 25 years commitment, plus other things to sort of make it all work together. But so far, so good.
That's great.
I mean, hopefully we'll be a new type of energy company that's, I could see us becoming one of the top 10 international utilities, if you want to call it that, where, we envision serving tens of millions of people by the end of the decade with 5,000 mini-grids. So, I think we're on the cusp of a shift. I think big building big is no longer the path forward, especially in emerging markets. It's small building big. And, I think we're proof of that. And, this decentralized energy wave that we're seeing right now, I think it's going to really have a really impactful decade to come as people realize that it's no longer just something that's a toy or a transitional solution. It's actually something that can provide long-term impact on a commercially viable basis and create 10 times the impact on the communities that they're serving.
Good luck. Hope that comes to fruition. And we'll catch up in 10 years' time
Yep.
and see where you
Anytime.
are and then what challenge you came up with. Thank you. Bye
Yeah,
bye.
that's great. No, I really appreciate having me on, Natalie. Thanks again.